Hello everyone. Today I'll be reading chapter 3 of Tuesdays with Morrie. So let's begin. The third chapter, that is The Student. At this point, I should explain what had happened to me since that summer day when I last hugged my dear and wise professor and promised to keep in touch. I did not keep in touch. In fact, I lost contact with most of the people I knew in college, including my beer drinking buddies and the first woman I ever woke up with in the morning. The years after graduation hardened me into something quite different from the strutting student who left campus that day, headed for New York City, ready to offer the world his talent. The world, I discovered, was not all that interested. I wandered around my early 20s, paying rent and reading classified and wondering why the lights were not turning green for me. My dream was to be a famous musician. I played the piano, but after several years of dark, empty nightclubs, broken promises, bands that kept breaking up, and producer who seemed excited about everyone but me, the dream soared. I was failing for the first time in my life. At the same time, I had my first serious encounter with death. My favorite uncle, my mother's brother, the man who had taught me music, taught me to drive, teased me about girls, thrown me a football, that one adult whom I targeted as a child and said, "That's who I want to become when I grow up," died of a pancreatic cancer at the age of 44. He was a short, handsome man with a thick mustache, and I was with him for the last year of his life, living in an apartment just below his. I watched his strong body wither, then bloat, saw him suffer, night after night, doubled over at the dinner table, pressing on his stomach, his eyes shut, his mouth contoured in pain. "Oh, God," he would moan. "Oh, Jesus." The rest of us, my aunt, his two young sons, me, stood there silently, cleaning the plates, averting our eyes. It was the most helpless I have ever felt in my life. One night in May, my uncle and I sat on the balcony of his apartment. It was breezy and warm. He looked out towards the horizon and said, through gritted teeth, that he wouldn't be around to his kids into the next school year. He asked if I would look after them. I told him not to talk that way. He stared at me sadly. He died a few weeks later. After the funeral, my life changed. I felt as if time were suddenly precious, water going down on an open drain, and I could not move quickly enough. No more writing songs in my apartment, songs that no one would hear. I returned to school. I earned a master's degree in journalism and took the first job offered as a sports writer. Instead of chasing my own fame, I wrote about famous athletes chasing theirs. I worked for newspapers and freelancers for magazines. I worked at a pace that knew no hours, no limits. I would wake up in the morning, brush my teeth, and sit down at the typewriter in the same clothes. My uncle had worked for a corporation and hated it. Same thing every day, and I was determined never to end up like him. I bounced around from New York to Florida and from Detroit free pass. The sports appetite in that city was insatiable. They had professional teams in football, basketball, baseball, and hockey, and it matched my ambition. In a few years, I was not only penning columns, I was writing sports books and doing radio shows and appearing regularly on TV, spouting my opinions on rich football players and hypocritical college sport programs. I was part of the media thunderstorm that now soaks our country. I was in demand. I stopped renting. I started buying. I bought a house on a hill, I bought cars, I invested in stocks and built a portfolio. I was cranked to a fifth gear, and everything I did on a deadline. I exercised like a demon. I drove my car at breakneck speed. I made some money, and then I had ever figured out to see. I met a dark haired woman named Jenny, Janine, who somehow loved me despite my schedule and the constant absences. We married after a 7 year courtship. I was back to work a week after the wedding. I told her and myself that we would one day start a family, something that she wanted very much. But that day never came. Instead, I buried myself in accomplishments because with accomplishments, I believed I could control things. I could squeeze in every last piece of happiness before I got sick and died, like my uncle before me, which I figured was my natural fate. As for Morrie, well, I thought about him now and then, the things he had taught me about being human and relating to others. But it was always in the distance, as if from another life. Over the years, I threw away any mail that came from Brandeis University, figuring they were only asking for money. So I did not know of Morrie's illness. The people who might have told me were long forgotten, their phone numbers buried in some packed away box in the attic. It might have stayed the same way had I not known, had I not been flicking through the TV channels late one night when something caught my ear. This is the end of chapter 3. Let's begin with chapter 4, the audiovisual. In March of 1995, a limousine carrying Ted K. Paul, the host of ABC TV's Nightline, pulled up to the snow covered curb outside Morrie's house in West Newton, Massachusetts. Morrie was in a wheelchair full time now, getting used to helpers lifting him like a heavy sack from the chair to the bed and the bed to the chair. He had begun to cough while eating, and chewing was a chore. His legs were dead, he would never walk again. Yet he refused to be depressed. Instead, Morrie had become a lightning rod of ideas. He jotted down his thoughts on yellow pads, envelopes, folders, scrap paper. He wrote bit sized philosophies about living with death shadows. Accept what you are able to do and what you are not able to do. Accept the past is past without denying it or discarding it. Learn to forgive yourself and to forgive others. Don't assume that it's too late to get involved. After a while, he had more than 50 of these forums, which he shared with his friends. One day, a fellow Brandeis professor named Morris Steen was so taken with the words that he sent them to Boston Globe reporter, who came out and wrote a long feature story on Morrie. The deadline read, "A Professor's Final Course, His Own Death." The article caught the eye of a producer from the Nightline show who brought it to the Coppell in Washington, D.C. "Take a look at this," the producer said. Next thing you knew, there were cameramen in Morrie's living room and Coppell limousine was in front of his house. Several of Morrie's friends and family members had gathered to meet Coppell, and when the famous men entered the house, they buzzed with excitement, all except Morrie, who wheeled himself forward, raised his eyebrows, and interrupted the clamor with his high sing song voice. "Ted, I need to check you out before I agree to do this interview." There was an awkward moment of silence when the two men were ushered into the study. The door was shut. "Man," one friend whispered outside the door, "I hope Ted goes easy on Morrie." "I hope Morrie goes easy on Ted," said the other. Inside the office, Morrie motioned for Coppell to sit down. He crossed his hands in his lap and smiled. Tell me something close to your heart, Morrie began. My heart? Coppel studied the old man. All right, he said cautiously, and he spoke about his children. They were close to his heart, weren't they? Good, Morrie said. Now tell me something about your faith. Coppel was uncomfortable. I usually don't talk about such things with people I have only known for a few minutes. Dad, I'm dying, Morrie said, peering over his glasses. I don't have a lot of time here. Coppel laughed. All right, faith. Hmm. He quoted a passage from Marcus Aurelius, something he felt strongly about. Morrie nodded. Now let me ask you something, Coppel said. Have you ever seen my program? Morrie shrugged. Twice, I think. Twice? That's all? Don't feel bad. I have only seen Oprah once. Well, the two times you saw my show, what did you think? Morrie paused. To be honest, yes. I thought you were a narcissist. Coppel burst into laughter. I'm too ugly to be a narcissist, he said. Soon the camera were rolling in front of the living room fireplace with Coppel in his crisp blue suit and Morrie in his shaggy grey sweater. He had refused fancy clothes or makeup for his interview. His philosophy was that death should not be embarrassing. He was not about to powder its nose. Because Morrie sat in the wheelchair, the camera never caught his withered legs. And because he was still able to move his hands, Morrie always spoke with both hands waving. He showed great passion when explaining how you face the end of life. Ted, he said, when all this started, I asked myself, am I going to withdraw from the world like most people do, or am I going to live? I decided I'm going to live, or at least try to live the way I want, with dignity, with courage, with humor, and with composure. There are some mornings when I cry and moan for myself. Some mornings I'm so angry and bitter, but it does not last too long. Then I get up and say, I want to live. So far, I've been able to do it. Will I be able to continue? I don't know, but I'm betting on myself that I will. Coppel seemed extremely taken with Morrie. He asked about the humility the death induced. Well, Fred, Morrie said accidentally, then he quickly corrected himself. I mean, Ted. Now that's inducing humility, Coppel said, laughing. The two men spoke about the afterlife. They spoke about Morrie's increasing dependency on other people. He already needed help eating and sitting and moving from place to place. What Coppel asked, did Morrie dread the most about his slow inside insidious decay? Morrie paused. He asked if he could say this certain thing on television. Coppel said, go ahead. Morrie looked straight into the eyes of the most famous interviewer in America. Well, Ted, one day soon, someone's gonna have to wipe my ass. The program aired on a Friday night. It began with Ted Koppel from behind the desk in Washington, his voice booming with authority. Who is Morrie Schwartz? He said. And why, by the end of the night, are so many of you going to care about him? 1,000 miles away in my home, in my house on the hill, I was casually flipping channels. I heard these words from the TV set. Who is Morrie Schwartz? And went numb. That's the end of this chapter. I'll start with the next chapter soon, and I hope you're doing fine. Take care of yourself and be in good health. Thank you. Bye bye.